Did I just have a bad dream? Or are one or more big pharma companies planning germ warfare on the public for their pecuniary gain? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. Yes, I made a provocative statement, and I meant it as such. The night before last, Project Veritas released a sensational video from one of their many undercover operations, and I mean sensational with a capital S. In it, a ranking executive of Pfizer Pharmaceuticals boasted that his company was running experiments to create mutant viral strains. The virus in question is, oh come now, you know what I mean, the virus that shall remain nameless. And why would they do such a horrible thing? To develop these mutant strains and immunizations against them in parallel, to be ready to bring said preparations to market. If this allegation is correct, no one should think for 1 minute that Pfizer is the only company so acting. This means that the world's drug companies, far from being the helpers of humankind they pretend to be, are willing to wage biological warfare on their own customers for their pecuniary benefit or for a worse motive. And yes, I have evidence. Before I start laying it out, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. And be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of great merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which reads, Pravda, better than CNN. One more thing. If you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come up with a new one. In fact, do you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click on that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, so long as it's legal tender. I will begin with a partial transcript of the Project Veritas undercover video, to which I have 2 links in the description. One from YouTube, the other from Rumble. In case you're scratching your heads and asking, Project what? Project Veritas is the journalistic organ of James O'Keefe. He specializes in undercover videos. Someone visits an office, or maybe arranges to go out on a date with someone, some ranking executive. And I will say only that Project Veritas operatives must be prepared to be interested in all sorts of relationships, and I'll leave it at that. This partial transcript comes from the Rumble page and represents Project Veritas' recollection of what the 2 principals in it said. The principal of interest here is one Jordan Tristan Walker, MD, Director of Research and Development, Strategic Operations, and mRNA Scientific Planning at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. Quote, one of the things we are exploring is why don't we just mutate it ourselves so that we could create, preemptively develop new vaccines, right? So we have to do that. If we're going to do that though, there's a risk of, as you can imagine, no one wants to be having a pharma company mutating viruses. Dr. Walker actually used a vulgar word, upon which I will close the curtain of charity. To continue the quote. From what I've heard is they are optimizing it, meaning the process, but they're going slow because everyone is very cautious. Obviously, they don't want to accelerate it too much. I think they are also just trying to do it as an exploratory thing because you obviously don't want to advertise that you are figuring out future mutations. Don't tell anyone. Promise you won't tell anyone. The way it would work is that we put the virus in monkeys and we successively cause them to keep infecting each other, and we collect serial samples from them. You know, to be very controlled, it had to be very controlled to make sure that this virus that you mutate doesn't create something that just goes everywhere, which I suspect is the way that the virus started in Wuhan, to be honest. It makes no sense that this virus popped out of nowhere. That's baloney. You're not supposed to do gain-of-function research with viruses. Regularly, not. We can do these selected structure mutations to make them more potent. There is research ongoing about that. I don't know how that is going to work. There better not be any more outbreaks because, whereupon Dr. Walker invokes the name of the Lord and Savior of humankind. The Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, as they call it, accounts for more than half the company's revenues. Now that explains this part of the conversation. Walker, part of what they want to do is, to some extent, to try to figure out, how there are all these new strains and variants that just pop up. So it's like trying to catch them before they pop up, and we can develop a vaccine prophylactically, like for new variants. So that's why they do it controlled in a lab, whereas they say this is a new epitope, and so if it comes out later on in the public, we already have a vaccine working. And the Veritas journalist says, oh my God, that's perfect. Isn't that the best business model though? Just control nature before nature even happens itself, right? And Walker says, yeah, if it works. The journalist says, what do you mean if it works? And then Walker goes on to explain, because some of the times there are mutations that pop up that we are not prepared for, like with Delta and Omicron and things like that. Who knows? Either way, it's going to be a cash cow. This virus is going to be a cash cow for us for a while going forward. Obviously. The journalist says, well, I think the whole research of the viruses and mutating it would be the ultimate cash cow. Walker said, yes, it'd be perfect. Unquote, Jordan Walker. But he's not through. Now listen to this. Quote, Walker, Big Pharma is a revolving door for all government officials. And the journalist says, wow. Walker says, in any industry though. So in the pharma industry, all the people who review our drugs, eventually most of them will come work for pharma companies. And in the military, defense government officials eventually work for defense companies afterwards. Then there's some crosstalk happens here, and the transcript skips over that, and then it picks up. The Veritas journalist says, how do you feel about that revolving door? And Dr. Walker says, it's pretty good for the industry, to be honest. It's bad for everybody else in America. Then the journalist asks, so why is it bad for everybody else? And Walker says, because when the regulators reviewing our drugs know that once they stop regulating, they are going to work for the company, they are not going to be as hard towards the company that's going to give them a job. That last segment illustrates something outsiders and some medical students have long suspected about the pharmaceutical industry. Recall the Pfizer Twitter file. It revealed a Pfizer board member, a former head of the Food and Drug Administration, asking for direct censorship of the present head. Recall also the Big Pharma Twitter file that revealed suppression of the movement toward an open source therapy development project. This problem is worse. This executive reveals that regulators commonly give Big Pharma free rein because they will eventually seek employment in that industry. You want to know what I think of the loquacious Dr. Walker? Hold that thought. I'm going to tell you. But first, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, and unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the last few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com. Learn how you can build a legacy to your future. So, what do I think of Dr. Walker? He talks too much. You'd think somebody would have taught him to keep his mouth shut. But clearly he's full of himself. And he makes a distinction almost without a difference between gain-of-function research and what he calls directed evolution. You know what? Directed evolution is actually a scientific phrase. It's another phrase for selective breeding, selecting for desired traits in multiple generations. Gain-of-function is the specific selection for a more transmissible or more virulent disease germ. And here I'm going to tip my hat to Mr. Alexander Grant, who referenced these concepts in an article that he wrote for Ty and Charlene Bollinger for their site, The Truth About Cancer. Dr. Robert Malone, who heads the Unity Project, to which I left a link in the description, reacted in horror when Project Veritas interviewed him for their video. "This man has no moral compass whatsoever," he said of Dr. Walker. But he said more, quote, "Would it be feasible for Pfizer to circumvent international or national law? I think that is undeniable. Walker has clearly indicated that Pfizer believes that it has successfully captured the regulatory apparatus of the United States government." Unquote, Dr. Robert Malone. Now, if you doubt what he said, just remember this. Pfizer captured the moderational apparatus of Twitter before Elon Musk bought Twitter and fired all its top executive echelon. The performance of the search engines is wildly inconsistent. The Brave search engine, last time I checked, produced a reasonable result. They're my favorites. Google does not. According to Brian O'Shea, Google, Facebook, and LinkedIn have been frantically scrubbing all reference to Jordan Tristan Walker, MD. In fact, I've left you a link in the description to the O'Shea article, but it's through the Wayback Machine because I want to make sure you'll be able to find it. Happily, enough records remain to state positively that Jordan Tristan Walker, MD, is who Project Veritas say he is. I also have a link in the description to an article by Robert Turner, founding editor of Medica Life, and that's through the Wayback Machine also. Twitter has not scrubbed anything, and Project Veritas has an account there. I've left a link to their tweet where you can not only view their undercover video, but you also get James O'Keefe's own provenance on Dr. Walker. So you see, I have 3 sets of provenances on this man. So don't tell me that he's a fake. And hold that thought. It will become important later. Anyway, Charlie Kirk interviewed James O'Keefe, the head of Project Veritas. And I have a link in the description to a video of that interview. Now we get to the interesting part. Yesterday afternoon, Mr. O'Keefe, per his usual modus operandi, confronted Dr. Walker over what he had told his operative. And at first, Dr. Walker denied everything he had said. He said he was literally lying to the operative because he thought he was on a date. Now, make of that what you will. The only thing is, he was already ranting and raving and screaming at the top of his lungs, actually calling the New York police and asking the restaurant staff to detain O'Keefe and his camera crew. And here it gets confusing. The restaurant manager did ask O'Keefe to leave, but Dr. Walker shouted, "No, no, don't let them leave." And somewhere in the process, O'Keefe did try to leave, but found himself and his crew locked in. So he asked the manager politely to unlock the door. And that's when Dr. Walker took it to the level of physical violence. He grabbed an iPad, that's Apple's version of a tablet device, and he bounced it and it fell to the tile floor. Then he got down on his hands and knees to pick it up again. Well, one of the cameramen was stepping on it to hold it down, but still, somehow Dr. Walker got the iPad back into his hand. Then he stood up and he raised it over his head and brought it crashing down on the floor. After that, the video gets confusing. It looked to me as though Dr. Walker struck or tried to strike O'Keefe and his crew. The crew pushed back just to stop from getting hurt. And not too hard either, because they didn't want to do any damage to the restaurant or any of the tables, the chairs, you know what I mean. Then O'Keefe found the door unlocked, so he said to his crew, "Come on, you guys, let's get out of here." And they left. O'Keefe starts dictating, "Oh, what a remarkable thing you have just witnessed, but we have our iPad back, so we're going to do our vehicle to leave." Well, O'Keefe and most of his crew did leave, but one offered to stay behind with a hidden camera. He caught Dr. Walker rushing out of the restaurant and stopping the first big SUV he saw, thinking it was the O'Keefe's, but O'Keefe was already gone. Shortly after that, the NYPD, New York's finest themselves, arrived in some strength. I counted 2, maybe 3 squad cars. The operative is there to show video footage to the cops, and they tell Dr. Walker that he, Walker, is lucky that O'Keefe has left the scene, because if O'Keefe were still there to give his evidence, New York's finest would have taken Dr. Walker into custody right then and there. Click through to the video yourselves. I've left a link in the description. And Charlie Kirk also had his own tweet of the second video, and I've left a link in the description to that too. And furthermore, I have a link in the description to a report from Human Events that the Daily Mail and Microsoft Network scrubbed their earlier stories about the interaction between Project Veritas and Dr. Walker. So what do we have? I'll tell you what we have. Those 3 provenances and the violent reaction by Dr. Walker to Mr. O'Keefe clearly suggest that Project Veritas nailed Pfizer. But we cannot and should not assume that Pfizer is the only one. Though Pfizer alone arranged for censorship of a government agency head, all members of Big Pharma conspired to quash talk of open source immunization development. Therefore, to assume that Pfizer alone engages in these practices would be dangerously facile. We must assume that they are all guilty, or at least all at moral hazard. Big Pharma has had a nasty reputation for systemic and institutionalized schadenfreude for decades. Indeed, advocates for socialism generally target them first. They always accuse them of price gouging. Indeed, the Heinz Dilemma, as Lawrence Kohlberg proposed it, has its basis in this price gouging accusation. Oh wait, and you're already wondering, asking yourselves, Heinz, who's he? You don't mean ketchup, do you? No, I don't mean ketchup. Heinz is a character in a little morality play that Professor Kohlberg wrote as a challenge to determine which of 6 stages of moral development a child has reached. Briefly, it goes like this. Heinz's wife is deathly ill. A local druggist has come up with a drug that could save his life, but Heinz has limited means, so he begs the druggist for a sample. Just 1 dose, that's all it would take. The druggist says, "No, Herr Heinz, it's my drug and I'm going to make money on it." Money that you obviously don't have. So Heinz gets desperate, breaks into the drugstore that night and steals a dose. Should he have done that? Your answer to that question, according to Kohlberg, tells you your stage of moral development. I've left links in the description to a capsule summary of the Heinz Dilemma and the Kohlberg theory of the 6 stages of moral development. Now, let's get back to the subject at hand. Yes, the socialists all point to the Heinz Dilemma and say that they will solve it by having the government develop drugs. Or else you're back to that open source development project that so many people wanted to run, but Twitter actually censored that talk. But in all the canards that the socialists or anyone else threw at Big Pharma, never once did anyone ever accuse them of biological warfare against the large patient population. This goes beyond any theory of moral development. This is like something out of a James Bond movie, or maybe a Michael Crichton movie, or a Stephen King movie. Not quite The Stand or The Dead Zone, but close. Dr. Walker hinted at their motive: to tailor their immunizations to the new strains, thus making them more valuable. Here's a word for that, ladies and gentlemen. The word is racketeering. Beyond that, Big Pharma has never supported sensible measures of dietary changes and supplementation. Happily, others have. And their recommendations are readily available. I urge you to go look for them. More broadly, this matter requires investigation at all levels, and that investigation should go beyond any consideration of viruses and immunizations alone. Links in the description of the article, 2 links to the undercover interview, as I said, then links to the Unity Project, to the articles by Brian O'Shea and Robert Turner for Project Veritas, to Project Veritas tweet giving their provenance, to the Charlie Kirk interview, to the violent confrontation, to Charlie Kirk's tweet of that video, to the Human Events article about the scrubbing, to the Heinz Dilemma and the Kohlberg theory of moral development, to my Declarations of Truth Twitter account, and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and oursilverlives.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and a link to each and every one of those videos that I've mentioned today. They're all on YouTube. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.